Welcome to Skill Builder. I'm Robin Clevitt, and we've been sent down a machine by Milwaukee to test. Now, I've had it in my possession for a couple of months now. Now, the kind of things I do with them is I rip down furring pieces, I do Arris rails, I make wedges, I cut boards down with them, so pretty much everything. We set ourselves up on site and we make a little workshop and away we go. The blade is particularly thin, and I think that needs to be thin. It's a bit like these sort of mobile skill saws and that sort of stuff. I mean, that's gonna make it work better. It's got a really good depth of cut for its class. It's gonna go up to about 60 mil. Okay, it's going to give you a bevel cut as well, right round to just over 45 degrees. It comes with two types of riving knife. One which has got this completely protected guard, and also it's got a kickback section on it as well. But if anyone's used to making notches in timber, when you're running the material in and you're pulling it back out again, actually you need to change this for the plain riving knife. But that's really simple, there's no Allen keys involved. You simply come round to the back, there's a lever, you pop the lever out and it slides out. So it's really simple to take it out and put it back in, so interchange it with the other standard riving knife, which is simply a riving knife. So you basically engage it in the slot, and then you've got the lever here, which is a clamp effectively. And once you've engaged it in the slot, pull these out of the way, you can clamp it back on, and that's it. It's as simple as that. So that's quite a good little feature. Let me tell you about the width of cut, or the potential width of cut. So this will cut over 600 millimeters wide, so it's obviously half a sheet of ply. You might say, well, ply is 4 foot. Well, this will go up to 615, 620 mil, so it will do exactly half a sheet of ply. But to enable you to do that, you can move the parallel fence. So the parallel fence simply sits over these two lugs through this position and clamps on. When you've got it clamped on this first one here, you're going to be able to take the parallel fence all the way up to the blade as far as the riving knife will let you go. So you'll be able to do thinner material. So obviously, as you pull it across there, you can bring that with a millimeter scale, and that's exactly what it's giving you as a width of cut. So to enable you to cut the full width of the table saw, when I slide this out here, you need to then change it over to the other pins and do something else. And this is quite important. If you're going to run a board across here and you've got the fence out there, there's going to come a point where you're going to start wanting to fall through and tip out. So what you find here is you flick this round, you pull it out, and you drop that in. And what that effectively does is give you a level support, level with the table. So we'll move it onto the other pin now to get it to the full width. Clamp those back in, so you've got a hook and clamp system there, simple. And there you go, you can get the full width of a sheet of ply now to 620 millimeters or thereabouts. So let me just give you a measure there. Yeah, so that's 615, so that's half a sheet of ply. So if you're going to try and run a full sheet through here, you'd need another pair of hands, and anyone who's done this before, where you bear in mind how long that is and how big a sheet is, you're going to get a little bit of wobble. So I would suggest that you've got rollers, bearing rollers, to help you with that. And also equally, sometimes the sheet of ply might be heavier than this machine, so you've got to make sure you're really, really well secure, because otherwise you're going to catch something and go over. Talking about that, the frame that it stands on, it folds up so it collapses, and it's got 1 foot which is adjustable, so it's basically able to level itself up. I mean, I wasn't particularly impressed with this stand when it came, because you've got to put it together, and it's a little bit, parts of it are a little bit flimsy, like this little catch here. It actually keeps popping out from the side there, so that could definitely be improved. But I mean, to be fair, generally speaking, I'm only ripping stuff down which this saw will handle, and I don't often clip that up because I'm nice and steady, and I'm not pushing like 8 or 9 foot pieces of timber through this without a roller anyway. So that basically comes over and clips on, but as you clip it up, it's popping out of this little hole there. And I've tried to squeeze it back in and form it with some grips and sort of try it in, but it still pops out. So I do think that the stand is okay. It's not 100%. So what can I say about the saw itself? Well, I'll run it up. So we've got a fully charged battery in there. Typical bit of CLS, so this is nice and dry. Anyone who uses CLS will know it's got a nice tight grain to it. It's got a rack and pinion system here, which is quite nice. It's got one on the front, one on the back, so it stays nice and true. Simply clamps when you're at the right measurement. It's got a small clamp, and you can move this in. You can use the wheel here, or you can simply slide it backwards and forwards. And what I like to do when I get this out, before I use it, it collects sawdust everywhere. You can put your dust extraction on it, but quite often you'll just let this, pile onto the floor if you're on site or whatever. But a lot of the dust sometimes gets trapped in these little tracks here. So in the morning I'll do this and I'll feel it, and if it feels like it's free, that's great. If not, what you need to do, you need to open it right up and give these a good blowout with a compressor, or even just a good blowout, and that keeps this from binding up. Because if you get a bit too much sawdust in one side and you're trying to crank this round like this, it's just not good for the mechanism. So you want to keep that nice and clean. So at the end of every day, give it a good clean. Let's talk about the rise and fall as well. Yeah, you can really control the depth there, and you can take it right underneath as well, so it's out of the way. So for transporting, it's probably a good idea to do that. And you can even take the riving knife out, take this off, and it's flat in the van as well then. So you could even potentially put another box on top of it, flat or whatever. In fact, I would say that's a good idea, because if you leave this on in the van and something goes on it, you can see that it's actually engineered to be quite thin. It's obviously got to be as thin as the blade, or slightly thinner than the blade. So therefore you really got to treat this with care. Also, when you're using this, this restricts the parallel fence, because there's about 25 millimeters from the outside of that to the center of the blade. I'll just take the blade back up so you can see what I'm talking about. So that's where you need to go back to the single riving knife. So I'm going to run it up. I'm just going to tell you about what I first found when I got it out of the box and we set it all up. It was cutting out of parallel slightly. And so all I had to do was, using a hex key, was just loosen off these slightly, and I had the riving knife out the way, and I ran that up to the side of the blade, put the blade up full, and I just made sure it was parallel. The other thing we tend to do with these, incidentally, is where there's machining, for example, where the blade housing cover is there, you can run that up to there and also check that it's parallel, because when they set these things up, everything should be pretty parallel and true. Equally, you can check them against these grooves which are in the tabletop, which incidentally is for this, something you're familiar with if anyone's got a table saw, and you can pop that in there, and you can take off, if you're making tenons for example, again, roll the table out there, you can run your shoulders off, so you can go back in and out. You can use the fence against there to run them in, but sometimes they bind, so it's best to actually put the fence and clamp a small block on here to run yourself in and out so they don't bind. And this is also angled as well. It's a little bit crude, just like a small protractor, but you can, create some angle with that if you want. Whilst you're looking at it from that angle, I'm just going to flick the table over onto the angle, which again is a simple clamp mechanism, and it slides around and you can clamp it back up. You're all familiar with that. There you go there. Again, you probably want to potentially use the other riving knife, because you find that these kickback protectors, they may catch. So it's probably best to use the other riving knife for that. So let me just stand it back up straight. Let's move this out of the way for a minute. I'll set this back up how I want it. There we go. Lovely. I'm also going to pop this off because I'm not using dust extraction for this example. And if you do keep that on, what sometimes happens is you get a little bit of sawdust, or sometimes, when you get the stringy bit of sawdust, it collects in there and it soon blocks up, and what happens then, it starts blowing the sawdust out the top. So if you're not using dust extraction, I'd pop that off. We're going to just check the battery there. It wasn't properly in, obviously, because I've been setting the saw up. So this is a new battery, and when we first got it, we were having some trouble actually clicking it in and out. So we couldn't fathom out why. The last thing you want to do is hammer these things in. They should slide in and slide out. So this was the battery that was in here, and I thought, well, how's that go? That clipped in fine. And this is the new battery. There we go. we're in. So it took a little bit of a shake to get it in. So I'm going to just rip through this bit of CLS, just set the blade just above the workpiece. Don't need any more than that. You make sure you use a push stick. Anyone who's been through carpentry college knows that you've always got to keep your hands within no closer than 300 millimeters of anything like this, or planer, table planer. So basically, there you go. So we've got a push stick here. I like to use 2 push sticks actually, quite a lot of the time. But generally speaking, with a riving knife on, you can run it straight through there. So we'll halve this down. We'll cut that back to 35 mil. We'll lock that off. Ear defenders on. I've obviously got my specs on there. So let's have a quick look at the cut. Not bad, pretty good. I mean, it's nice and square, to be fair. It's nice and parallel. I haven't had any issues with that at all. I've ripped quite a lot of door linings down with this particular saw, where you get the door lining standard 5 1/4, and all the new construction timber, it doesn't work with 1/2 inch plasterboard or 12.5 mil plasterboard. So that's quite useful. So it's absolutely perfect for that. If you're out doing a lot of door linings, this seems to be really good for that. And I'll probably get through about 8 door lining sets on 1 battery. And let me just give you a quick workout what that is in meterage. There's about 5 meters per door lining kit. So that's 40 linear meters. And that's material which is just over 25 mil thick, or 26, 27 mil thick. Generally Scandinavian type softwood, knotty. So that's that. Let's just do some sheet material. So what we'll do is we'll set it up now to do a slightly wider cut. And I'll show you how that works. Back onto there. And we'll just take off a little bit off this. We'll reduce this down a little bit. Check everything's in order. So we're going to pull round this little support here. That's it. And what that gives you effectively, it's all level now. Okay. So in conclusion, how did I find this saw? Would I have bought this saw? Well, for one, over £200 for this 12 amp hour battery. Obviously you've got the capital cost of the saw as well. So personally, for what I'm doing, I'm using a lot of construction material. As I said at the beginning of this video, I'm ripping down furring pieces. I might be doing, reducing some big construction timbers and that sort of stuff. So it might not suit me for what I do. However, I do get involved with second fixing. So you might get architraves that you need to rip down on a slight taper, that sort of stuff. So as a second fixer saw, on the site, on building sites where sometimes power's an issue and you're really relying on your battery kit, I think it'd be pretty good. You could rip skirtings and architraves down all day long on this with a 12 amp hour battery, I would say. So in conclusion, possibly not really for the first fixers out there, unless you are doing a bit of both, or you're on a site without any power, then it's ideal. But second fixers, yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good bit of kit, because a lot of us guys are using track saws now. So, the comment I made earlier about setting up for a big sheet, straight away you're going to say, where's your track saw? And equally you are going to use a track saw for that. But sometimes it's quite nice if you're doing repetitious stuff and you want to run soffit boards off 9mm ply sheets. You can set this up to 250mm or whatever you're using, and you can run them off all day long. So thanks very much for joining us and watching us here on Skill Builder. There's so much exciting stuff coming up. So a lot of the manufacturers are sending us bits and pieces. So please keep checking back. to join us in the near future.